Hello everyone and welcome back to my course Microsoft 365 Security Administration MS 500. We are in section 13 and in this lesson we are going to discuss about information barriers. And more specifically, we are going to explain what information barriers are, information barrier policies, and information barriers in Microsoft Teams. As you know, Microsoft 365 enables communication and collaboration across groups and organizations. Information barriers is the way to restrict communication and collaboration among specific groups of users when necessary. Information barriers is now supported in Microsoft Teams, SharePoint Online, and OneDrive for Business. So that being said, let's talk about information barriers. So as I was saying, this is now supported in Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive for Business. And assuming your subscription includes information barriers, a compliance administrator or information barriers administrator can define policies to allow or prevent communications between groups of users in Microsoft Teams. Information barrier policies can be used in situations like user in the day trader group should not communicate or share files with the marketing team. One example. Finance personnel working on confidential company information should not communicate or share files with certain groups within their organization. Or let's say an internal team with trade secret material should not call or chat online with people in certain groups within their organization. Now, very important. Information barriers only support two-way restrictions. One-way restrictions, such as marketing can communicate with day traders, but day traders cannot communicate with marketing, is not supported. Now, when information barrier policies are in place, people who should not communicate or share files with other specific users won't be able to find, select, chat, or call those users. With information barriers, checks are in place to prevent unauthorized communication. Now, initially, information barriers apply to Microsoft Teams chats and channels only. So in Microsoft Teams, information barrier policies determine and prevent the following kinds of unauthorized communication. Searching for a user, adding a member to a team, starting a chat session with someone, starting a group chat, inviting someone to join a meeting, sharing a screen, placing a call, sharing a file with another user, or access to a file through sharing a link. Now, information barrier policies. So with information barriers, you can define policies that are designed to prevent certain segments of users from communicating with each other or allow specific segments to communicate only with certain other segments. Now, basically, in this section, you plan, define, implement, and manage information barrier policies. And several steps are involved, and the workflow is divided, of course, into several parts. When you define policies for information barriers, of course, you'll work with user account attributes, segments, block, or allow policies, and policy application. User account attributes are defined in Azure Active Directory or Exchange Online. These attributes, of course, can include department, job title, location, team name, and other job profile details. Segments are sets of users that are defined in the Security and Compliance Center using the selected user account attribute. Information barrier policies determine communication limits or restrictions. When you define information barrier policies, you can choose from two kinds of policies. Block, and these policies, of course, prevent one segment from communicating with another segment, or allow. And allow policies allow one segment to communicate with only certain other segments. And lastly, policy application is done after all the information barrier policies are defined and you are ready to apply them in your organization. Now, take a look at the table on the right-hand side of the slide and you will see the actual information barrier workflow. So first of all, there are prerequisites, which you need to ensure that are met. They are explained here on the right-hand side of the table. Then in step 1, you segment users in your organization. Then you define information barrier policies. You apply information barrier policies. And of course, as needed, you either edit a segment or a policy or troubleshoot. So please take a moment and take a look at these let's say, steps in the table and what exactly do they imply. Now, the information barrier compliance management role is responsible for managing information barrier policies. Of course, you will find a link in the downloadable resources for this lesson, which takes you to additional reading and in-depth details in regards to this. That being said, let's get on to our next topic here on our lesson and talk about information barriers in teams. So you might want to use, of course, information barriers in situations like, as I was saying, a team must be preventing from communicating or sharing data with a specific other team, or a team must not communicate or share data with anyone outside of the team. The Information Barrier Policy Evaluation Service determines whether a communication complies with information barrier policies. Very important. Before you set up or define policies, you must enable scoped directory search in Microsoft Teams. So then you wait at least a few hours after enabling scoped directory search before you set up or define policies for information barriers. You'll find, of course, a link to detailed information in regards to prerequisites for information barriers in the downloadable resources for this lesson. So, first of all, let's talk about the information barrier triggers. So, information barrier policies are activated when one of the following team events take place. Members are added to a team, so whenever you add a user to a team, the user's policy must be evaluated against the information barrier policies of other team members. After the user was successfully added, the user can perform all functions in the team without further checks. Then, another trigger would be a new chat is requested. So each time a new chat is requested between 2 or more users, the chat is evaluated to make sure that it isn't violating any information barrier policies. Another one is a user is invited to join a meeting. Again, when a user is invited to join a meeting, the user's policy is evaluated against the policies of other team members, and if there's a violation, the user will not be allowed to join the meeting. Then another trigger would be a screen is shared between 2 or more users. And as you can imagine, anytime a screen is shared between 2 or more users, the screen share must be first evaluated to make sure that it doesn't violate an information barrier policy. Then we have a user's placing a phone call, a VoIP phone call in Teams. And of course, this is also evaluated before the call is made if it violates the information barrier policies, and if there is any violation, the voice call is blocked. And then the last one, guest users in Teams. So information barriers apply to guest users in Teams as well. And if a guest user needs to be discoverable in your organization, then you would want to check manage the guest access in Microsoft 365 groups. So once the guest users are discoverable, you can define information barrier policies which will apply to these guest users. So this is information barriers in a nutshell, let's say at a high level overview. I will see you in the next lesson where we are going to talk about building ethical walls in Exchange Online. I hope this has been informative for you, and thank you for viewing.